mainly due to the alarming contraction of our energy sector. As a career management and outplacement company, I feel that it's really important for Higher Landing to pass along the most current and relevant information as it pertains to managing your careers so that you can be equipped with the resources you need in order to make important decisions going forward. And certainly there will be, especially as we head into 2021. And you know, I think that we all have a responsibility to educate ourselves on what's coming. We are just one resource of many that I think you should be tapping into in order to get the latest on developments in this industry. And when we talk about what's coming, for sure there's going to be change around the robotics and artificial intelligence areas, whether we like it or not. And you know, it's no secret that we are in the midst of probably one of the largest workforce transitions in history. And industries around the world have been transformed forever, and COVID has just accelerated it. This is something that Dennis is going to speak to us today about. And this is why I'm so excited to have him. Dennis is a roboticist, he's a futurist, and I'm just excited to know him and have him in my network, never mind, let alone have him speak to our clients. So he's going to talk to you about the impact of robotics and AI on the professional job market and how we can prepare for it. He's also going to talk about what is happening behind the curtains to automate and introduce artificial intelligence to pretty much every industry, as everyone is marching forward at the same time. And what he believes is that when these industries shift, they're not going to shift slowly. Instead, as he says, they're going to swing like a hammer, with millions of jobs being lost to technology and millions of new jobs being created, which is a good thing for us. So he's also going to talk about how this transition will bring the evolution of a significant number of jobs that have historically not been high tech, and how there's going to be a considerable opportunity in the future for those who are prepared. So Dennis Kambeitz is actually a Calgarian. I didn't know this. So what's really cool is that I was doing my own research and my own due diligence on this industry for you guys. And I stumbled upon this website that had Dennis, that it was showcasing Dennis. And I practically fell over because I was thinking, my gosh, I have never listened to anybody that has such an ability to explain how robotics and AI is changing the world in as clear language as Dennis could. And so when I was doing research, so I tracked him down, and I couldn't believe he was actually from Calgary, of all places. So I'm really excited to have him, very precipitous. So Dennis is founder and CEO of Robotics Education, and he helps educators worldwide understand what they need to do to prepare our youth for the future. Very important mission. He addresses the millions of jobs that are going to be impacted by technology and how people can set themselves up for success in the future. His approach to teaching robotics has helped thousands of students around the world, and he's also trained hundreds of teachers, helping them understand best practices for teaching robotics. So this is a really new emerging field. He's frequently invited to present at educational conferences, and his presentation called Preparing Students for a Robotics Future has been described as transformational and something every educator needs to hear. So on that note, I am really excited to have Dennis deliver his inspiring world-class robotics and artificial intelligence information. And so if you could, Dennis, we're excited to have you, and I'll just pass it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It's a very wonderful introduction. I hope I can live up to the hype. So I'd just like to start by giving people a little bit of framework of who I am. I'm not formally trained in robotics or coding. I've been doing this for about 8 years now. I fell into it in a way that is very organic, where I had an employee working for me at another company I had. And in his spare time, he was building a robotics platform. And then that ended up turning into an industry or a career for him. And he built that up into a company. And it's this guy, it has evolved into this guy here. But it's the most powerful and easy to use robotics platform in the world for educating people. And I know this guy here looks like a toy. Don't let that trick you. It's really, really powerful. But it's, you know, what happened for me was I didn't have the robotics background, but every few days, the founder of this company, whose name is DJ Schurz, he's also a Calgarian, he would come to me and go, hey, look, you know, my robot can, what happened is he hacked a Wall-E toy and turned it into a robot. And he'd come into the office and say, hey, look, my robot can drive around the room without crashing into things. And now this goes back 8 years ago. So, you know, at the time I was kind of like, I mean, neat, but, you know, interesting. I didn't, you know, and then the next day he'd come in and he'd say, oh, look, I can have a conversation with my robot. And I'd be like, oh, that's interesting. But I didn't realize that what I was looking at was cutting edge robotics. And so, you know, DJ and I over the years developed a good friendship. And as his company started to grow, I started to offer him some insight into some of the aspects that I had seen in the growth of my business. Through doing that, I started to understand that he was actually sitting on a pretty incredible product. But more than that, I started to understand the impact that robotics and artificial intelligence was going to have on the workforce. And so I started saying to him, like, your robots are incredible. You should be taking these into schools and talking to educators about that. Should be a huge market for you. And at the time, he was heavy into R&D and didn't have the, you know, the resources for that. So I said, I'll go talk to some for you. So I started talking to educators, and what I found was, by and large, people didn't understand what was coming. And 8 years ago, I was in the exact same position. I happened to learn what was coming because I had, you know, this guy working for me that was making this robotics platform. And so over the last 8 years, I've, you know, spent probably tens of thousands of hours, a huge amount of time, learning about robotics and artificial intelligence, understanding the impact it's going to have on the workforce. And I now, you know, as Jackie said, I fly around the world speaking at education conferences, trying to help teachers to understand what's coming so that they can prepare the students and our youth. And what I can tell you is it's still, even now, 8 years later, significantly misunderstood and significantly underestimated in terms of the scope of how it's going to redefine the workplace and society. So what I like to do in these presentations is I like to start small and then just kind of we stack on top of it so that we can start to build a comprehensive understanding of the scope of change that's coming. And so I'm going to talk about some industries and careers that are not going to be probably the ones that you guys are in, but you're going to see the pattern forming and you're going to start to see how things are evolving so that you've got a good, strong understanding of this. Some of the stats I'm going to come out with and the information and the picture that I paint in the first 30 minutes has the potential to be pretty overwhelming for people. And I just want to say, don't be overwhelmed. You have a place in the future. The future is going to be good. It's just that we have to pivot and get ourselves ready for it. And a lot of times when I talk about robotics, people are, you know, they're intimidated by the word robotics. They're intimidated by artificial intelligence. I think it doesn't, you know, this is not for me. You know, it's not part of the, you know, it's not part of humanity and stuff. So I just want you to be patient and understand, you know, that we will get to the information that's going to show you why it shouldn't be as intimidating for you. So there's the potential of some poll questions. I'm not sure if the moderator, if Becca can pull those out.
I can do that right now for you, Dennis.
Perfect, thanks so much. I just want to get a sense a little bit of who, you know, who you guys are so I can try and answer the questions and pivot the information a little bit more for you.
Okay, so apparently we're just having some technical difficulties because Jackie and I are both signed in under the same account. It looks like it won't let me poll. Jackie, are you able to just log out of the meeting for 5 minutes so I can get this polling done? Sorry, everyone.
And, you know, and when you're answering these questions, do not be afraid to offend me. You know, a lot of times when I go into presentations with students, I can tell they have no interest in robotics. So I always start off with a question like, you know, who here thinks robotics is gross? You know, and my hand is in the air. Like, you won't offend me. So answer truthfully. It's going to help make the process better and make the information I can give you better once we get them up here in just a second.
My apologies. I'm not sure what's going on. Normally, I'm a super Zoom pro, but it turns out I'm having some issues. So if you want to maybe just come back to that after, Dennis. Sorry about that.
Okay, that's okay. Yeah, just bust in and let me know when you've got them.
Sure.
Thank you. So I guess what I'll do is I'll start out by saying that most of the people that I talk to are educators, government officials. I've talked to ministries of education and stuff. But in those scenarios, the people I'm talking to are principals, superintendents, directors of curriculum, ed tech, experts, people that are really responsible for directing our children's education. And even with people that are in a position where you would hope they would have a real strong understanding of what's coming in the future, that knowledge base just isn't there. And so I've talked to more than 20,000 educators in the past 8 years, or the past 4 years actually. And I always, in my presentations, I always say, show of hands, who here feels like you have a strong understanding of how robotics and AI is going to impact the future, impact the workforce, and feel like you know what you need to do to prepare our kids. And out of 20,000 educators, less than 50 have put their hand up. So that's about 1 in 400. So if you're sitting there and you're feeling like, man, robotics, I don't know, this isn't for me, you're not alone. You're in great company. and really, I would have been in that same scenario, a few years back. So don't be intimidated by this. And just know that what I'm talking about today is gaining robotics literacy. I really think that's the most important part of robotics. I think it's misunderstood. And when I talk to educators about this, and I'm going to frame a lot of this conversation about educators. I know some of you will have children, some of you won't, but the responses that I get back from educators are kind of indicative of what I've seen, generally speaking. So a lot of times we think of robotics as an industry. We think of artificial intelligence as an industry, and they are, but I like to parallel it back to how we viewed computers in the 1980s, right? Back in the 80s, some programmers would have written a piece of code and sent it out to the accounting industry. And the accountants would have said, this is incredible. It's made my job easier. I've got better accuracy. It's faster, and we would have said 2 thumbs up. And then some coders would write something for the medical industry. And this was starting to happen. And what we were realizing back then was these programs are pretty useful. We're probably going to need more coders in the future. And that was a true statement. But what we missed was the greater implication. And that was that everybody was going to need computer literacy, or you were going to have your field of opportunity significantly limited. So today we look at robotics and artificial intelligence much the same way, as silo industries. And they are that, but they're also going to quickly become a layer across all industries, just as computers did. Now, the big difference is it took computers 30 years to get to the point it's at today, to get to significant adoption, mass usage. We won't have that time frame with robotics. It took computers that long because we had to shrink a mainframe from the size of a room or a gymnasium down to fitting in your pocket, right? And the hard work has already been done. So robotic applications and artificial intelligence is going to start coming out as fast as people can think of applications and write the programs for it, right? And so, what's happening is these changes are occurring in all industries simultaneously. And we're not seeing a lot of them because they're all just building up. They're all percolating. So I was at a robotics conference. This probably goes back about 6 years ago now, maybe even 7. And it was called Robo Universe. And it was in New York City, heavy duty, manufacturing robots everywhere and stuff. And I was invited to do the opening keynote, to give a presentation much like this. So, I did my opening keynote, and I was really interested to see how it was going to be received, because I'm talking to a room full of roboticists. And I was really surprised throughout the next, 2 days of conference, the number of people I talked to that came up to me and said, I've never thought of it that way. Because here's one of the things that happens. A lot of times engineers, your job is to get this product from A to B. And you're like, okay, I'm going to do that. But we don't take that 10,000 foot view and say, what happens when there's 2,000 engineers going from A to B. And when that process happens, what we're going to see is significant change starting to erupt in all industries almost simultaneously. Now, I recognize that certainly a good portion of the people that we're talking to are currently unemployed, which is terrible. But what I would tell you, and I know that can be a very hard situation. What I can tell you is that may put you in a position where you have the opportunity to enhance your skills and your knowledge base and get a new perspective on the workforce ahead of the people who are currently employed, right? Because they're busy going to their jobs from 9 to 5 or their 12-hour shifts or whatever. And so they don't have the resource of time to put into upskilling. And what we're going to find is people with robotics literacy and strong tech literacy are going to be significantly advantaged in every industry across the planet within the next 5 years. So if you have the opportunity to layer this knowledge into what you already know, that's going to benefit you greatly. I know some people might be looking at career pivots, and we'll talk about some of those things as well. We can talk about some of the jobs that are going to go away, and some of the new opportunities that are coming. But what I can tell you is if you have a passion for a career, if you can layer in robotics literacy, you will go further and higher and faster. And I'll explain why that is as we get going here. So I just thought I would quickly check, Becca, do we have polls yet? No response. I'll just keep rolling.
Not yet. Sorry, I'm still not sure what's going on. This is the first time I've ever encountered that. So we're all learning together, guys.
All good. All good. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to start to go through some of the big industries so we can start to see what the changes look like and how that's going to impact things. And we're going to start to build a cumulative picture. The industry I love to start with is transportation. And when I started doing this 8 years ago or so, and I started saying, has anyone heard of Google's self-driving cars? Most of the people haven't. Now today, we, by and large, all know about self-driving vehicles, self-driving trucks. We know that all of the companies out there are trying to build them to gain market share. And a lot of times I'll ask people, have you thought about the implications of self-driving vehicles? And the answers that I get back most often are less traffic congestion, less parking congestion because your car could drop you off at work and go home. People with visual impairments would be able to get around. Time in your car commuting to and from work could be work time because you could be sitting there on your laptop working while your car drives you to work, or texting or whatever. Insurance implications is always a big one. If my car hits somebody while I'm in the car as the driver, but the car has done it, who's liable? Those are all relevant, topics and discussion points and concerns. But the big one that people don't talk about is the number of jobs that are potentially going to be impacted. Because if we have self-driving vehicles, do we need bus drivers, truck drivers, cab drivers? And the answer is no, no, and no, right? So all the people that are Uber drivers now, Uber's play is to have self-driving cars. I believe. I haven't heard them say that, but that's the logical business conclusion that I would come to. Why? Because it's cheaper, right? What's cheaper than paying a person? Paying a car to drive itself. So I believe that's what they're trying to angle towards. They want to be the brand. So when self-driving vehicles are approved, you can just order an Uber without a driver. Now, some people won't feel comfortable with that, but as technology improves, people will become more comfortable with it. And it's also important to understand that, and I'll build on this as we go forward, but there are economic implications if you're a cab company and cab company A has self-driving vehicles and you want to try to keep people employed, right? If you're paying those people $40,000 a year and you can buy a self-driving vehicle for an extra $40,000 or $30,000 or whatever that number might end up being, within the first year you've paid for that extra expense. After that, you put $40,000 in your pocket for every additional self-driving vehicle you have, right? I could have 10 employees or I could have $400,000 or whatever the number is, right? So, but it's not going to be small. So what we're going to see is as soon as self-driving cars become approved, those industries are going to swing. We're already seeing self-driving vehicles being used in the outback in Australia. I've been told that there are some being used up in the oil field. I have not been able to confirm that yet, but I was told that by people that are up there, so I expect it's probably valid. The US Post Office tested self-driving vehicles from, I believe it was Phoenix to Dallas. In Northern Europe, there's self-driving buses transporting people. We have a self-driving vehicle in Calgary that goes from the zoo to Telespark. So these technologies now are close. And so now we have to think about, okay, so incidentally, the transportation industry, and I talk a lot in the US, so I'll use US stats, but we can just divide by 10 and they should be more or less accurate for Canada. The transportation industry in the US employs about 3.5 million people. And so we have to recognize that at some point in the next 5 to 7 years, there's going to be a year where 3.5 million people are going to lose their jobs. And these robots are not going to be, if you're GM, you're not making a self-driving car to make one. As soon as that thing is good to go, man, you are replicating those as fast as you can on the line, right? And the US is pushing very hard for self-driving vehicles because they're trying to get the market advantage. They want GM and Ford and Tesla and stuff to be the leaders in those industries. So now what happens when, and I recognize that many of you are in this exact situation. Now, it's a Tuesday afternoon, you've lost your job, and and you're a truck driver. You come home, you sit down on the couch, and you're like, man, what am I going to do, right? And it's important to understand that when I'm talking about these changes, these are not a recession, right? These are not oil prices are down. These are paradigm shifts in the way the workforce operates, in the way society merges together. These are changes that do not come back. If you're a truck driver and you lose your job, you are retraining or you are not working. Those are your two options, right? There will still be some truck driver jobs, but the competitiveness for those jobs will be massive, right? And it might be there's long haul, but maybe there's short haul trucking, which doesn't pay as well as the long haul and stuff. But anyways, by and large, millions of jobs are going to be lost. So then you've got your truck driver, your cab driver, your bus driver sitting on the couch going, okay, what can I do? I don't have, okay, and this might be wrong, and maybe you guys are different from the example I'm going to use. The majority of us don't spend our evenings sharpening our axe, right? Most of us are busy coaching our kids' sporting events. We're watching TV. We're out with friends, watching sports, doing whatever it's going to be. Most of us don't spend a bunch of time keeping up our skills, looking for the next opportunities at work, right? So now imagine a truck driver that's been on the road for 20 years and he's lost his job. So you're like, okay, what jobs can I get? And it's like the number one answer I get when I ask educators that is maybe they can go work in hospitality, go work in a restaurant. But the restaurant industry is also undergoing change, and it's undergoing staff contraction. And this is pre-COVID. COVID is a massive accelerator for this. But we'll talk about that again in a little bit. But now, to demonstrate the changes that are happening in the restaurant industry, we don't have to look any further than McDonald's. When I used to go into my McDonald's by my house 3 years ago or 4 years ago, there were 4 or 5 people across the front counter, 2 shifts a day, 8 to 10 people taking orders. Today there's 1 and a bunch of touchscreen ordering. Now, there's no headlines about this, but if we do the math and go, okay, there's 1 person taking ordering, there used to be 4 or 5. So if we say 1 shift there's 4, 1 shift there's 5, used to be 9 people, now there's 2, 1 per shift, reduction of 7 people, 15,000 restaurants across North America. That's a reduction in the number of people at McDonald's, or number of people needed at McDonald's by 105,000 in 2 years. No headlines, no news coverage, right? And we just saw headlines the other day, Synovus and Husky merger, 2,100 jobs to be cut, or whatever the number was. It was in that range. So that's a headline. That's huge news. 2,100 people losing their employment. That's significant, certainly obviously in this province. But think about 100,000 people losing their employment at the McDonald's. And now think about this. If those touchscreen ordering things at McDonald's work Are they going to put them in a Burger King? Yes. Chick-fil-A? Yes. Dairy Queen? Yes. A&W? Yes. And I travel a lot throughout the US, and we're starting to see those screens in all restaurants, and in all fast food restaurants. So that's a fundamental pivot. If you fly a lot for work, you know that a lot of the restaurants in the airports have touchscreen ordering and entertainment and stuff at your table as well. So now, and this is not to take a shot at McDonald's. This is just, we have to understand that the best way to figure out what's coming is to understand what is coming in technology and then put that up against human nature. And human nature says this: if I've paid $500,000 or $1 million or $2 million for a McDonald's franchise, and I don't know what the number is, but let's say it's in that range. If I have the ability to put in touchscreen ordering and save $100,000, $200,000, $250,000 a year and put that right back in my pocket, I'm going to do that. Everybody would do that. I've asked thousands and thousands of educators. I've presented them with these hypothetical questions. Would you do this? Would you do this? I've only ever had one person say in one of my hypothetical questions that they would keep people employed. I congratulated that person and told them they were the best person I had met. But unfortunately, the reality is you're going to be competing against these other companies that don't, and economically they will just beat you. And so all that's going to happen if you try to keep people employed against technology and flow is your business will suffer. And if you're a small business or a medium-sized business, that comes directly out of your pocket, right? So not a shot at McDonald's by any stretch. We've all made the same decisions when Walmart came in. I don't know if you guys remember when Walmart came to Calgary. There was a lot of people that were like, I'm going to keep shopping at my local stores. I'm not going into the Walmart. But, Walmart's prices are 10, 15, 20% better. And so then enough people start going, and most businesses, if they lose 20% of their customers, are in big trouble, right? So if 20% of shoppers go to the Walmart, these other stores are in big trouble, right? Economics always wins. And that's, I'm not trying to present that as raw economics, but that's the reality. So we just have to be mindful of that. And if we understand that that's the way things are going to work, then we can start to prepare ourselves and pivot properly. So now also, if you look at the McDonald's, we're starting to see that they are looking at robotic chefs. Those made an appearance this year, which I think they came out last year, but not widely adopted. So now the back of the house at restaurants is undergoing the same change as the front of the house. And there's one company that claims that their robotic chef knows 2,000 recipes. There's a restaurant in China that is 100% robotic, including food delivery and preparation. Everything is done by robots. And we have to understand that once that technology is there, once it proves itself, it's going to replicate rapidly across the world. So the hospitality sector, there's robotic coffee shops. There's a hotel in Japan that's run by 10 staff, and the rest of the hotel is serviced by robots. There's robotic orderlies in hospitals and stuff. These things are starting to come. Robotic customer service at airports, the self-check-in. All of these technologies are starting to hit, right? So the bottom line is the hospitality industry can't absorb the people from the trucking or the transportation industry because they're also contracting. COVID, again, is an accelerator of this, obviously, but this is what has been coming for a while. So we won't worry about COVID. We'll layer that on later. So you've now got the transportation industry, huge employer. You've got hospitality, huge employer. And now you've got all of these people looking for employment, but they don't have high-tech skills. So now where can these people go to get a new job? And then the next answer that often comes up is retail. But does anyone know what's happening in retail, right? Brick and mortar retail is under assault by Amazon, eBay, and every other online store out there because it's a more cost-effective model. And so, and last year, I don't know what the actual stats ended up being, but brick and mortar retail was forecast to shrink at 30% faster than the year before. Again, COVID is an accelerator. So brick and mortar retail can't absorb these people because brick and mortar retail is in trouble. And if your job has historically been a cashier, or a customer service person in a retail store, you may keep your job, but only a small percentage of people will, right? So it becomes very competitive again, which of course doesn't help with wages and stuff. And so the retail sector is being hit, and those are 3 big industries, right? And so, you know, the forecast is that over the next 10 years, it goes typically between 30 to 40% of jobs over the next 10 years will be eliminated by technology. Eliminated. Again, that's an important distinction. These are not economic blips, right? The government cannot subsidize jobs that are eliminated, right? That if you lose 40% of the jobs, those people need to find employment elsewhere. Again, I know that a lot of you are in that position today. So I'm trying to paint a picture of, you know, what the future landscape for employment is going to look like. So not only can you get a job now, but you can future-proof yourself. So we've got those 3 big industries. And incidentally, 40% of jobs being eliminated represents about 60 to 65 million people across North America. So when you think about that stat, now 65 million people going through this exact chain that I was just talking about, the exact chain that many of you have gone through, where it's like, okay, I've lost my job. Now what can I do? You know, if you're in the petroleum industry, or the energy industry, it's like, well, this is what I know, and this industry is not hiring now, right? This industry is under assault. And in Alberta, we've got it really, really tough right now. We've got technological change putting pressure on. We've got, you know, the oil and gas pricing suppression putting pressure on, and we've got COVID putting pressure on. So it's really a cocktail that is difficult to navigate. But the one thing that we know is that the jobs, you know, I'm talking about the millions of jobs going away. There are millions of new jobs coming as well. But many of these new jobs are going to be reserved for the people that have the new high-tech skills. Robotics literacy, coding, 3D printing. If you understand these technologies, you're much more likely to get these new jobs, and you're also much more likely to do well in the jobs you have. So it's another important distinction to understand about this change that's coming, is it's not just that robotics and AI, again, they're not just silo industries, they're going to be a layer across all industries. And what I love to do when I'm talking to educators to help them understand this is I say, okay, you know, think of what I've just laid out here, and then let's fast forward 3 or 4 years. What kind of teachers are getting hired? Where is the skill gap in education? And, you know, and the way that I like to pose it to teachers, and I'm saying this, and again, I'm framing it with education, but we need to think about this, and you need to think about this with your own particular career. If you forecast forward and understand what the world is going to look like, you can start to understand where your career or industry fits in it. So I say to the teachers, like, you know, if your job has gone well and you've become a principal, and you're looking to hire a new teacher, what kind of teacher are you looking to hire? And the answer that always comes back is robotics, coding, 3D printing, you know, big data analysis, virtual reality. It's all high-tech jobs, all of them. And so here's an interesting thing. If you're going into university today and you want to be a teacher in 4 years' time, you better have those skills on your resume, or your resume is going to the bottom of the pile. Teaching has not historically been a high-tech career, but for the next 5 or 7 years, it is. Social teachers that specialize in social studies or English are much less likely to be hired because we already have teachers in the system that can do those jobs. What we don't have are teachers in the system that can teach robotics and coding. And so if you're coming and you're applying for a job and you have those things on your resume, you are way, way more likely to get hired. And in fact, last year I was at a principals conference, a high school principals conference in the US. Every single principal I talked to, and I talked to 200 or 300 at the conference, everyone that I talked to and asked that question to and posed that scenario to, they all said, those are the teachers being hired today. But here's an interesting thing. When our universities are preparing our teachers, they don't understand that those are the teachers that are going to be in the highest demand. they're starting to go, hey, you have to get some STEM skills and stuff like that. STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math. So if I say STEM, that's what I'm referring to. But the teachers that are, you know, learning math, there's lots of math teachers in there already in the system. So the math teachers are not likely to be hired, even though that's part of STEM. It's the engineering, it's the robotics teachers, it's the coding teachers, 21st century skills. And we have to understand that, because that's a layer that is going to, or a reality for virtually all careers. Another example I love to give is going back to that robotics conference that I mentioned I was at 6 years ago in New York City. The other real big takeaway for me from that conference was that I met 20 to 25 people from the fashion industry. And that really surprised me, because, you know, I'm at this like heavy duty robotics, right? Assembly line stuff. And so over the 2 days, I meet these many people, but I always try to ask people what they do, because I try to give them contextual information. And so after I met 3 or 4 people in an hour from the fashion industry, I started making this comment to people, like, I'm like, you're the 4th person I've met in an hour from the fashion industry at a robotics conference. Why are there so many of you here? And half of the people told me, if you want to get a job in the fashion industry today, which is now 6 years old, it's a 6-year-old information and it blows people's mind. You want to get a job in the fashion industry today, 2 of the most important skills are 3D printing and robotics. And every single person I talked to from the fashion industry put 3D printing ahead of robotics, but those were the 2 that were always on the list. The other half, so half of them said those were 2 of the most important skills. The other half of the people said they were the 2 most important skills. Now, I think most of us, if we thought about it, would go, fashion design is way over here in creative, and robotics is way over here in technical, right? The fact that those 2 things have now come together is surprising, but important for us to understand, because many of our careers will face the exact same kind of merger, right? And the way I love to present this to people, so they understand how this is going to impact them and how it's going to impact, you know, your guys' ability to get a job in the future, and not just a job for today, but 5 years down the road. This is really foundationally important for how you look at things. Imagine that you guys all own a fashion company, and this circle represents all the crazy fashion that's ever been created in the history of man. It's all in that circle. If you add 3D printing and robotics, the circle gets bigger. So if you're a fashion company and you want cutting edge design and efficiencies in production and stuff like that, do you hire the person that gives you this or this? And the answer is obviously this, because you want the greater potential, all other things being equal, right? But here's the important thing to understand. Once these people become available, these people stop getting jobs, right? And that's, we're at the tip of that iceberg now. And this is where I was saying that as challenging as it is for everybody right now with COVID, and certainly if you're unemployed, you have an opportunity to jump the queue and to get these skills before other people. Because if you get those skills and you're in this outside circle, you're way more likely to get a job. And again, this goes back to why I talk about robotics literacy and tech literacy. It's not about being a roboticist. Okay, the people, if you're thinking about a career pivot, coding and robotics, you're gonna get paid. But you know, there's a lot of people out there that would say that robotics is gross, it's not for them, and I completely understand that. You know, you won't find me doing robotics in the evening in my spare time either. I'm not wired that way. I understand the impact, and I'm passionate about helping other people get the education and understanding and knowledge that they need, but I'm not going to build a robot myself, you know, as a hobby for my own personal satisfaction, right? That's just who I am. And so, but here I am, CEO of a robotics company. So, you know, it's really about having a high level of knowledge about the technology first, right? A lot of managers, you know, IT managers aren't IT experts. They understand IT, they understand managing people, right? And so that's kind of the mindset that I'm going to impart to you guys today and to educators in general. And it's really a mindset that you should try to impart in your children, for those of you that have kids as well. And, you know, because if your kids don't get this education, man, they're going to graduate into a world that doesn't look a whole lot like what it looks like now. And so, you know, what I want to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of a detour from talking about your guys' specific situation. And I'm going to talk for a little bit, for about 5 minutes, on education. And this is for the people that have children, because I want you to understand, you know, part of the solution is, okay, if there's going to be all these unemployed people, what are our schools doing? Are our schools going to create all of the people that are going to get these new jobs? How are my kids going to do? And what I can tell you is, here, you know, in schools that offer robotics across North America, here are what the stats look like. At the high school level, 2% of boys and 0.2, maybe 0.3 at this point in time, because it's slowly creeping up. But, you know, so we'll say 3% of boys, 0.3% of girls are learning robotics. And we're talking about something that is rapidly becoming a key literacy, and 3 girls out of 1,000 are learning it. 30 boys out of 1,000 is no screaming hell either, but it's a better number, right? But what that means is the majority of people that are listening to this right now, if you have kids, they don't have an interest in robotics. They don't have an interest in coding. And so this presents some challenges. I just want to do some drawing here on the board and behind me. This is my bell curve of engineering-mindedness. So this curve represents all the people, you know, in a school or in society. And the people over at this end are your most engineering-minded people. People over at this end are your least engineering-minded people. And most people fall somewhere in the middle. When schools are offering robotics, they teach it in a very engineering-like way. The 2% of people that they're engaging are this top 2% here. At the middle school level, the number is 5 to 15%. And so if you have children, and at the elementary level, you can get kids way more interested in learning stuff. If you have children, try to get them into this technology as young as possible, because every year that passes before they start to get into it, they're going to think, I can't do that, this isn't for me. And, you know, assuming that when you're listening to this, you fall within the realm of most of the people I talk to. Most people listening to this are going, robotics isn't for me. And I'm going to show you how robotics is different than what you think of it in a moment here. But, so this is what's happening. They're getting 2%. And at the middle school level, 5% to 15%. And what I want to tell you is I've done robotics presentations to over 18,000 students from around the world, from inner city Los Angeles to the prairies of Canada, New Jersey, down to Melbourne, Australia. At the high school level, the way we teach robotics, we can get 25 to 45% of kids. So schools that adopt our strategies can go from, you know, 3 girls out of 1,000 to 250 to 450 out of 1,000 that want to learn robotics. Now, again, that might not be pertinent to you, but what it does point out, if you don't have kids, what it does point out is the way we teach robotics is very, very different from what everybody else is doing. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that, just so you understand that robotics is not what most of you think it is. At the middle school level, we get 90%. And so if we can get 90% of middle school kids to want to learn robotics, that's a game-changing thing. So right now, the kids that are in school aren't getting this education. Half the kids that graduate from our schools only have enough high-tech skills to get the exact type of jobs that are disappearing. So 40% of the kids that are graduating from our schools are likely going to end up in trouble in the next 5 years as well. This is so critically important. And the kids that I think are in the biggest challenge, or are faced with the biggest challenge right now, are the children that are in, I say middle school, junior high. It's the same thing. In the US, it's middle school. I guess in some places in Canada, it's middle school as well. Grades, 6 to 9 kind of range. Those kids are the ones that are in the most jeopardy, because they're going to graduate from high school at the exact time that these changes are starting to really, really take hold. We're starting to see them now. They're accelerating, but they're not they're not rampant yet, although COVID is accelerating that as well. So yeah, it's again, if you can get your kids to understand this, high school children, it would be great if they can get this as well, but at least high school kids, some of them that are not going on to university, will get this knowledge and will have an opportunity, or not, they won't get this knowledge, but they'll have an opportunity to at least start to build connections and stuff in the work world, right? Like if you're graduating from school in 4 or 5 years and you don't understand this technology and you don't know how to apply for jobs or interview, or, you know, you don't have a good network of people that can help you get a job because none of them have jobs either, man, that's going to be a tough environment. So if you have kids, whatever you can do to get them this education, man, do it. It's so, so important. Now, and this is kind of indicative of what we see with adults as well. Adults tend to be down in the 2% range. So what that means is if there's 100 people listening to this, there's probably 2 or 3 that are like, yeah, or maybe, you know, and I know that there's, you know, within Alberta, we've got a lot of engineers. We have a very educated society or population. So, you know, we might have 10 or 12 or 15% of people that would be interested in learning robotics within Alberta. But that doesn't mean if you're at this end of the curve that you don't have a place. Because I'm probably sitting about here. I've got a decent mind for technology, but I'm not super passionate about it. So I just want to point that out to everybody. And what we do differently when we're teaching robotics is we have a way to inspire people and help them gain instant confidence in robotics when we're teaching it. And that is so hugely important, right? And we do the same thing. I've trained hundreds of teachers to teach robotics. And most of those teachers have 0 coding experience or 0 robotics experience beforehand. I would say probably 95% of them. So if you're sitting there going, I don't know anything about this stuff, that's okay. They didn't either. You can still learn it. It's learnable by everybody. You know, I've worked with, like I said, 18,000 kids. I've never had a single child that couldn't learn this. And I teach robotics to kids as young as, on average, 10 years old. I've taught to some that are as young as 8 years old. But everybody can learn this. And so what you have to do is be willing to go out there and make mistakes. You have to be willing to go out there and look like you don't know what you're talking about. But it's kind of like learning a new language, right? When we start to learn French, just because you're 40 or 50 years old doesn't mean you can write paragraphs in French. You start with bonjour and you build from there. So learning robotics or coding is the same thing. And it doesn't matter, I mean, apart from the fact that I recognize you want to get a job today. If you go out and you get a job today that doesn't involve technology, you need to immediately start going, okay, is my job on the chopping block over the next 5 years? Because a lot of them will be. Or is it going to undergo significant change? I can't recall if I mentioned this stat. The World Economic Forum in 2018 released a study that said by 2022, a minimum of 54% of adults were going to need significant retraining and upskilling to remain competitive at work. That was before COVID. COVID would only make that number worse. 54% of adults. So, you know, and again, right now I recognize that the position you're in is hard, but it is a position where, because of the timing of things, you may be able to put yourself in a really great position for the next decade, 20 years, by layering in some additional knowledge and understanding. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about education. I want to get back now to the workforce, and I want to try to paint a picture of the changes that are coming, so that you all know, I know that you all know that finding a job and stuff is serious business right now, but that you're trying to find the right kind of job and you're trying to prepare yourselves and give yourself the right skills. I was doing a presentation like this at an adult training center, and one of the people I talked to that was in the audience wanted to become a truck driver. And I'm like, okay, awesome, go out there and get that truck driving job. Just know that the day after you get it, you have to start preparing for the next job, because it's going to be on the chopping block as well. Right? And if you guys have the opportunity to take this knowledge and layer it into what you're doing and what skills you have, if you're a chemical engineer and you understand robotics, you can figure out all manner of new ways that you can use robotics and artificial intelligence to create, enhancements. I can think of, there was an article I read that was about a robot that worked over the weekend. I believe it was in a dark lab, so no lights on, or at least not overhead lights on. It was testing elements and the combination of elements to use in solar panels. And over the weekend, it performed 623 tests, or in that range, and improved the efficiency of the materials that are going into solar panels by 10% over the span of a weekend, right? The technology that's coming is going to do incredible things for society as well. But it's just the important thing is that it's also going to bring incredible opportunity, and it's going to bring potentially incredible hardship. And it's important to understand those things. And if you've got children, I just want to go back to the education thing for 1 second. I've got 3 children. My oldest is in college, and when he was applying at colleges and universities, every time we would go for a tour, I would try to talk to as many of the instructors as possible, and he wanted to take business management courses. And so I would talk to the business management instructors, and this is not a comment on business management instructors. Generally speaking, nobody knows what's coming. But I would always ask them, do you understand the impact robotics and AI is going to have on the workforce? And feel like, you need to teach the kids to prepare for it. I didn't talk to a single prof or instructor that felt confident in their knowledge. Not one. Now, when these kids graduate in 4 years' time, I apologize. When they graduate in 4 years' time, they're graduating into a world that does not look like it does today, right? And so, but they're not getting the education or the new world knowledge that they need, right? So it's important to try to source this stuff out. Google is your friend. You can do a lot of good there. We're working together with Higher Landing to create some courses to help people be able to get robotics literacy and to be able to understand how robotics and AI is going to impact their direct career and what careers they might want to go into, and kind of taking a look at those things, not just from the perspective of what's happening today, but where things are going. Jackie can send you guys information on that over the next few days if you guys are interested in taking more in-depth courses. That's I don't have a lot more information on that because we're finalizing the details, but I think it's important that even if you're not going to take that, you need to hop on Google and you need to start to investigate. And so what I want to do is I want to show you real quickly what how we get so many people wanting to learn robotics. So we do it with this platform here. And again, this looks like a toy. My understanding is that what I was told by the founder of the company is that NASA was using this product for rapid prototyping. So it looks like a toy, but it's so powerful that NASA is using it. Now, that is incredibly uncommon to get, right? So we, when we're teaching 10-year-olds robotics with this platform, they're learning the same type of robotics that NASA is using. We don't teach them the real world text-based coding languages at that age typically, although we have. But now we're typically using block programming to get kids going on it. But I just want to show you guys some of the things that this little guy can do here in case you're contemplating taking one of the courses that is going to be offered. So I am going to just launch my software here, connect my robot. He connects with Wi-Fi.
Dennis, while you're doing that, I'm just going to take a quick moment to just mention that I did not get a chance to get the polls working. However, I did create a link on SurveyMonkey, which I did post in the chat. And I've just posted again. About half of you guys have taken this so far. Thank you for that. It should only take a moment, about a minute. If you can just click that link and then answer it, and then I can provide the answers to Dennis when he's done showing us this amazing robot that he's got here. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so I'm not going to share my screen here yet, but I just want to show you, because when I go into the schools, typically what I try to do is I try to help the kids understand why robotics education is important, which is largely the same as what we've been talking about here. I don't give the kids the hard stats like 40% of you are going to have a hard time finding a job in 4 years if you don't get these skills. But I do want, you know, I want to take that opportunity to inspire them. And then what I'll do, and this is how I hook all of the kids and get them excited about it. I turn to my robot who's been standing beside me. Like I talk for 5 minutes and I say, you know, I know a lot about robotics. I can keep talking for the next hour if you want, or I can show what this robot can do. Everybody wants to see the robot. So I do this. JD, show me how strong you are. JD, what else can you do? Now, when I do this in a classroom, all the kids are like, oh my God, I can't believe what I'm seeing. And the kids get super excited. I programmed both of those in about 20 minutes. And again, I have no formal programming background. If I can program this in 20 minutes, everybody here could program that in 20 minutes. And when we're talking about robotics, it's important to understand that I'm not just talking about assembly line robots. We're talking about robotic applications, and they are already all around us. And the one that I love to talk about the most is when people, because it kind of redefines how people think of robotics and robotic applications. When you go to the mall and the doors open automatically for you, that's a robotic application. And what makes a robot? You have to have a processor, a computer chip, has to be able to sense its environment, and it has to be able to physically react with its environment, right? So when we start to think about robotics from that perspective, flow sensors that can open and close valves automatically in factories and plants and stuff, those are robotic applications. The doors at the mall are a robotic application. The sensor, you walk up, the sensor goes, oh, there's motion. The chip tells the doors to open, right? And what we're going to start to see over the next 5 to 10 years is the world around us is going to be recreated. We're going to have things like robotic shoelaces, right? And I know that sounds preposterous, but robotic light bulbs, walls, paint colors, obviously cars, toasters, fridges. You know, I'll be able to talk to my toaster in 3 or 4 years' time. It will recognize my voice, and it will know that Dennis likes his toast just a little bit more golden than his daughter does, right? So those types of things are coming. And the advent of 3D printing and stuff means that we can recreate and reinvent things in new and exciting ways and create structures that we could never previously create, right? Not as certainly one piece. So we're starting to see supercars being created with 3D printers and stuff. There's incredible change that's happening all around us all the time. And we use this little guy to help integrate and show people how simple it is. So I showed you a couple moves. I'll show you a couple more that I love to show the kids. JD, take a seat. JD, take a seat. JD, stand back up. JD, are you a bird? Okay, so and I want to show you one that was programmed by an 8-year-old. JD, can you sing Happy Birthday?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear human. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Okay, that's enough for this portion. This guy can do lots of stuff. He's got built-in camera. You can hook up it's a modular platform, so you can build whatever you want out of it, which is kind of nice because then we can have kids start with real basic robotic shapes, and then they can start to build up to building very complex robots. You can get things like LiDAR sensor, infrared ultrasonic, accelerometer, gyroscope, inverted pendulum. Those last 3 are the technologies they put into self-balancing boards, right? So the platform is very powerful. And here's kind of a cool thing. I'm going to share my screen for a second. I have screen sharing disabled. So Becca, can you pop that back on for me?
Yeah, you bet, I'm on it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so just gonna share my screen here. I want to show you, because everybody here is looking at this little robot and going, okay, it's a toy. I want to show you another robot that I show to the kids. So what I do in my presentation with kids is I show them these things, then I get them to volunteer and come up and program.
Actually, Dennis, I think we're not seeing your screen.
Oh, you're not. Let me try
We're seeing this beautiful ocean view.
Okay, that's all that's there right now.
Okay, sorry.
It's coming in a second. Sorry, thank you. So when I'm in a presentation with kids, I show them the robot for 5 minutes or so, which means we've got about 45 minutes left in a class. In 45 minutes, 10-year-olds can program this robot to wave, to talk. They record their voice and have it come out the robot. They can program it so that it will respond to a Wii remote, so they move their arm, the robot moves its arm. It has a built-in camera. They have it tracking colors and recognizing a student and greeting them by name and responding to their voice. And they do that all within 45 minutes. So it's super, super easy. If I can get 10-year-olds to do that in 45 minutes, it has to be easy. But now watch this video, because I'll say to the kids, who here could program that? And all the kids will put their hand up and say, okay, yeah, I could program that. So I'll say, everybody here agrees they could program this little robot? And everybody always does. Then I show them this video.
Excuse me?
Yes, miss. What can I get for you?
White wine, please.
Coming right up, miss.
Now this is a 3D printed robot on a wheelchair base.
How is your day, miss?
Pretty good, thanks. Busy, lots of meetings.
Sounds like a really long day, miss.
Yes, it was a long day.
When I show, I'm just going to pause this for a second. When I show this video in schools, a lot of times the teachers will turn their head and go, oh my God, we've gone too far, right? Now you guys are seeing it on your computer screen. I'm typically showing it on a large screen, so people are seeing it pretty much life size. Just going to fast forward here a little bit.
May I have your glass, please, miss?
Of course.
Thank you, miss.
You're welcome.
All right, so you've seen it pour there. I'm going to stop my share now. And so that is an in-move 3D printed robot. That particular one is controlled using the exact same hardware and software as this. So I love to say that to kids after they've told me that they can program this. I'm like, okay, so you all said you can program this. Who can program that big robot? Nobody thinks they can. I'm like, it uses the exact same hardware and software. So all of you just told me you could program this. Let's look at what this other robot's doing. He's moving servos. The servos are the little motors. Did you program your robot to move servos? Yes, you did. Okay, so you could do that. He's listening. Did you program your robot to listen to your voice? You did, so you could do that. He's visually tracking. Did you program that? You did. And we go through the list. I'm like, you guys have already shown me that you could program 75% of what this life-size humanoid robot is doing. And now that robot is in a very limited application. These kids, I'm not suggesting that 10-year-old kids could program a robot bartender. That would take additional knowledge and understanding. But the important thing is they can get the skills needed, the direct skills needed, and then it's just a question of scaling it. Somebody used this platform as well to program it was a Japanese inventor that programmed a life-sized Scarlett Johansson robot, which I think is 50% creepy and 50% awesome. But he got a whole lot of publicity about his $50,000 Scarlett Johansson robot. And the cool thing about that is it was using that free software and this controller, which is $100, right? And so now this is important to understand that when we're teaching kids robotics in schools, those kids are going to come out knowing that they can do this. So those kids, the kids that are getting that education are going to be getting these new world jobs, right? But the good news is there's already a massive skill gap. right? Anybody who learns these new skills can get these new world jobs. And so, and it's not about necessarily being a roboticist or a programmer, right? If you're going to be a fashion designer, again, having this knowledge helps you. I was doing a presentation at a school in Invermere. I was driving to Kelowna because I was doing a presentation in Kelowna. So I went to the school at Invermere to do some training of a teacher. And while I was there, I said to the principal of the school, I'm happy to do a presentation for your kids if you want. So they made a general announcement and a bunch of kids came down into the theater to get a presentation, more uplifting than what we're talking about here. But because I always just want to inspire the kids, as long as we give them inspiration, they're good to go. Right now, I think that adults need to understand what's coming. So I try to give adults the real nuts of what is happening. Anyway, at the end of my presentation, I had a teacher come up to me and she told me that her students were psychology students. And I'm like, that's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. Why did you decide to bring your psychology students down? And she said that she gave the class a choice. It's like, do you guys want to go and see this robotics presentation, an AI presentation? And the students said that they did, because they wanted to know if AI was going to replace them. And so what my response to that is AI will evolve to the point where you can get phone-in counseling that will be AI. That is going to happen. It'll be a very cost-effective solution for people to receive some counseling and assistance. But when we think about the changes that are coming to society, and I know that some of you are going through this right now, losing your job is difficult. When I'm talking about the changes that are coming, it's easy to feel overwhelmed and to feel like you don't belong in the future. Although, like I said, anybody can learn this really, so please don't feel that way. But there's going to be a lot of people that feel like they don't belong or disenfranchised. And so my comment was, go back and tell your students this. If people are feeling depressed and wiped out by technology, are you more or less able to get them back, back to being productive and feeling good about their place in society and their place in humanity? Are you more able to do that if you understand the technology? And the answer is yes. So, I recognize that many psychology students would fit over here on this end of the curve. But if they still have this layer of technology, it's going to give them an advantage. It's going to allow them to do better in the future. So, I hope that I've given a few different examples. Certainly engineering is one that is going to undergo significant changes. I believe that over the next 10 years, we are going to make significant improvements to the environment. Those improvements are going to come via technology, via robotics and artificial intelligence. I believe that we're going to make huge advances in medicine, again, through the use of technologies. It's going to be that way across the board. And even in retail stores, for example, Lowe's has a store in San Jose, and they've been testing customer service robots for probably 4 or 5 years now. And again, when a company invests millions of dollars into a technology, once their robot proves to be successful, are they going to put it in just one store? No, it's going to roll out all across every Lowe's store in North America. That's going to give Lowe's an advantage over Home Depot. So Home Depot will have to roll them out. And then IKEA is going to see that and go, hey, that's pretty cool. We're going to roll it out. And then it's going to be Walmart, and it's going to be Costco, Superstore. As soon as one company proves that it works and it's cost effective, every other company is coming on board. And we talk to lots of companies that have, personal assistant robots and stuff. And I can tell you that right now, I'm not impressed with them. But in 5 years' time, what they can do is pretty good. But in 5 years' time, what they can do will be excellent. And so we're going to start to see those things happen more and more. But getting back to that retail example, if Lowe's has self-checkouts, customer service robots, and warehouse robots, if you're the regional director for Lowe's and you're hiring a new store manager, are you hiring somebody that understands those technologies or doesn't? So even in something like retail, again, not typically a high-tech career, if you want to go to the top of that career, you have a much better chance if you have the technological education, right? So my advice to everybody is take the steps that you can. I know it can be difficult to invest in those types of things when you're unemployed, but take the steps that you can, do lots of research. If you have kids, try to get them into this stuff as quickly as possible. And I know, that what I want to give you guys as well is as much pertinent information and answer direct questions that you guys may have. I know that a lot of the information at the beginning is kind of like, whew, this is going to be a challenging time. It is going to be a challenging time, but it's going to also be a time of incredible opportunity. And you guys being unemployed right now may give you an advantage over the next 2 to 10 years. If you can use this time and use this awareness to gain this knowledge. And I'll tell you that over 99% of people in Alberta don't have this knowledge. Probably 99.9% of people don't. So if you can layer this into what you do, whatever that is, it's likely to be a differentiator that's going to help you get a job. So what I want to do then is throw it open for questions. Becca, I'm not sure, what the best mechanism for this would be?
Sure. So maybe first of all, I'll just quickly review the answers to the questions that we had sent out. So the first question was, are you actively looking for work? We had 90% of people answer yes and 10% of people answer no. And this is based on 54 people who responded, just so that you know. The next question, do you feel confident in your knowledge of how AI and robotics will impact your industry or career? Let's see, we had 76% say no and 24% answer yes. And then the last question, how excited would you be to learn robotics or coding as a career? We had nobody say I already know it. We had 11% say not overly excited, 35% answer maybe, and 54% answer definitely.
Wow, honestly, those are really great numbers. In terms of people that already understand the impact, in terms of people's open-mindedness about upskilling themselves in an area that is pretty uncomfortable for a lot of people. So I was curious what they would look like in Calgary, because I know we have a lot of very well-educated and engineering-minded people. So those are interesting numbers. Thank you.
Absolutely.
So Dennis, would it be fair to say then that basic robotics literacy training would be essential for pretty much everybody, even for those that might be considering, we call them survival jobs at, let's say, Home Depot, because their competition might be younger folks that are a little bit more technology literate, and they might not even be able to compete for those jobs.
I think that's definitely true. And, if you understand the technology, you put yourself in a position where you're less likely to be scaled back, and you're more likely to be able to make good recommendations that are going to help you advance. I was at a conference in Austin, Texas, and we went to the Home Depot because we needed something for our exhibit. And I was trying to buy the stuff, and there was 4 people sitting at the customer service counter, or customer service lanes, because it looked like checkouts, but it said customer service. And then down the way there was checkouts, but there was nobody down at the checkouts. So I walked up to a person at the customer service counter and I said, can I just buy this with you? And she's like, no, you have to go down there. And I'm like, okay, well, is there anybody down there that can help me check out? And I kind of got tissed. I got a no. Just use a self-checkout, kind of like that kind of attitude. And I was just like, oh, you don't understand what's like. I was trying to buy with a person to, as small as it was, to kind of skew the numbers and go, hey, people are valuable and stuff. But yeah, if you're looking at survival jobs, it's important to understand that most of these companies, most companies don't have a good plan for what they're going to do. And so people that have this knowledge in a survival job, most survival jobs are not where we want to end up, but they could be springboards to where we want to end up. And certainly they can be, they are incredibly important. So if you end up with a survival job and these skills aren't going to help you, then you still should be getting these skills because they're going to help you land your next great job.
So they will make you more competitive.
Oh, no question. No question.
Perfect. Okay, so I think we're going to open it up for questions. I do have some questions that a few of you have sent me in advance. Unless anyone would like to come forth, I'm happy to get started on them.
We've got one in the chat. Danielle, would you like to ask it?
Yes, so Dennis, a lot of us are starting from scratch. I mean, I'm an engineer, but I don't know much about, those new tech. So how can we become literate in those technologies?
I guess, so what kind of engineer are you, Danielle?
I'm mining, actually.
Mining, okay. So mining is getting totally reworked in a big way. So the big thing is everybody starts from the start. So don't, and this is going to sound real basic. Just don't be afraid to start. I love this platform because it is super easy for people to start with, by themselves and to get to learn it. We are teaching courses and stuff in this. We are going to be working with Higher Landing to create, or we'll be announcing shortly, we have been working with them to create introductory courses that are going to be a real light touch just to kind of give you some literacy and some grounding in it. And then from there will also be, week-long courses or longer courses to help give you the skills, maybe to add and layer in the skills to allow you to pivot. Certainly within a career like mining, the knowledge that you have is tremendous and huge. And if you layer in an understanding of this technology, that should allow you to continue in that industry if you want to. Some people are looking to pivot. Some people want to stay where they were because they like their industry, and this knowledge can help. So yeah, Jackie will be sending out some information over the next couple of days about those courses if you want to take those. If not, there are online resources available that can help you learn coding. Coding is, when people talk about artificial intelligence, let's maybe step back here for a second. A lot of people misuse the term artificial intelligence, and a lot of companies are like, oh, we have artificial intelligence, and really what it is just database management and programming. Now, true artificial intelligence is coming. It's evolving and it's getting better, but it's still a ways out. But even basic vanilla flavor artificial intelligence is really valuable. If you've got an engineering background, learning coding would allow you to start to be able to integrate and bring these technologies to your industry. So Danielle, are you looking to stay in mining or are you looking to pivot?
No, you asked me what was my degree, but I have 3 degrees. So
okay.
my mining was 30 years ago. But, most recently I was CFO for a startup in lithium extraction. But, I'm talking generally speaking, not everyone has a technical background. And I mean, a lot of us are unemployed, right? So we can't afford to pay a week-long course. So I was looking for suggestions on free education for the moment.
Okay, if you were looking to learn coding, there's a company out there called robogarden.ca that has a pretty good coding platform. So that would be, now that's not going to be free, but it's going to be near free. And so that is about 300 hours of coding education. People would start out with Blockly and then advance to Python or JavaScript. And so, that would be something that you could layer in and do in the evenings and in spare time. Again, it's not totally free. Code.org would have some resources for you. Part of the challenge with learning robotics per se is robotics is a physical thing, right? So you can get the coding aspect of that pretty easily and cost effectively or free from some places, but the robotics aspect, that's a much harder one to do for free.
Well, you only talked about robotics, but there's 5 technologies, right, that you mentioned today. So what about the other ones?
Well, so robotics is the one that we're focused on because it's like that we typically focus on because it's the central pivot point. Virtual reality, 3D printing, same things. Now, I believe that there are libraries in Calgary that have 3D printers. And so you could go out and you could get some software inexpensively or free. I think there's one called Tinkercad that would allow you to start to learn 3D design. And then you could potentially go and print those at the library or find companies online that will 3D print your designs. So, you know, and learning 3D design is huge as well because, you know, and this is going to be oversimplified. There's probably very little purpose for this, but you could manufacture a ball inside of a ball inside of a ball inside of a ball, right? And it could all be a solid state unit. You could never do something like that with traditional manufacturing practices. So they're remaking engine designs and everything is changing. So learning, you know, you could self-teach that way. And, you know, and YouTube's a great resource as well. There's a lot of good learning resources on YouTube. Certainly in terms of how to use these softwares. You know, Tinkercad is not going to be directly applicable probably to the workforce, but it would give you still the basic skills and basis, right? And understanding.
Dennis, there's a really good question here. Could you please clarify the difference between artificial intelligence and robotics, as well as the difference between their industries? And I know you've got comments on that.
Okay, so robotics is how a computer interacts with the world. Artificial intelligence would be what makes the computer think, or how it thinks. So we're going to see robotics or robots that have artificial intelligence. Those will be appearing in the future. And really a lot of robotic applications, the goal would be to have artificial intelligence in them so they can learn and do better and augment. We're going to see artificial intelligence in a big way in data analysis, right? And in resourcing, you know, for example, the medical industry. One of the things that's happening right now is we've got COVID going on, and really what should be happening is COVID, okay, 5 years from now, the knowledge exchange on best practices for treating COVID and stuff are going to be significantly streamlined and better because there will be information hubs, right? You look at IBM's Watson, and it is currently better at diagnosing many ailments than doctors. You've got, I think it was Google's AI that could diagnose breast cancer with higher efficiency than doctors or than radiologists, or, you know, but so AI will be more prevalent because AI can be sitting in your pocket on your phone. It can be, you know, in the lights and stuff. It can be involved with things that are not robotics. Really what it comes down to is AI is potentially the brain, but true AI can teach itself, right? You know, but what happens right now is a lot of things that are being presented as AI, I believe, are just really good programming where they've programmed algorithms directly in, you know, that would go, okay, well, you know, when I did this, I was able to stand the pen up. Therefore, you know, I'll keep going on that front. That can just be really good programming, not necessarily artificial intelligence. So.
And didn't you say too that AI and robotics are not industries unto themselves?
Right, and so, you know, if you're working in almost any industry, AI is going to be, you're either going to be listening to AI or inputting and interacting with AI. Amazon has, again, this wouldn't be true AI necessarily, but, and you know, as a caveat, this is what I read, so I don't want to say this is for sure what Amazon has, but this is what I read, that they've got software that tracks people's movements and efficiencies like down to the nth degree. And then that software is telling managers, this person's not being this efficient. What happened to this 5 minutes? What happened over there? And so the managers are getting really high level detailed information from the software. And what's going to happen is a lot of management decisions are going to be based on the software. And then there's going to be AI in some cases making determinations on what courses of action you should take. As a small business, an example of that would be doing Google AdWords, right? So we do those types of things now. And what happens is we have to look at it and go, okay, which ads were performing the best for us in which markets? You know, where did we get the greatest return on investment and stuff? And that is something that is going to be imminently better done by a piece of software. And that software won't even necessarily need to ask me where to put, or put money. We can that could be programmed, or you could select features that just go, yeah, maximize the return. For brand awareness, for return on investment, for sales, or whatever it's going to be. Those types of technologies are coming, and those would be called AI, whether or not they will be. I mean, eventually they probably will be, but over the very near future, companies are already saying like, oh, our AI will do this, but it's mostly just really great programming. So AI is the brains, robotics is how it interacts. But they both will be everywhere. AI will doubly so be everywhere.
Interesting. Thank you, Dennis. Marion, you've got a good question. Would you like to ask it?
Sure. Thanks for the presentation. My question was, how do you foresee the application of robotics in people-related industries? And you mentioned like the analysis of data could be done by robotics, but like I'm thinking examples like community outreach or like negotiation or like human rights law and things like that. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah. Okay. So AI and or machine software is already really good at doing a lot of the legal work. There's technologies out there that are also going to be super efficient in negotiating, right? So, and this is going to sound over the top, but this is the type of thing that's coming. I might have AI that, if you and I are negotiating, that will pick off very micro changes in your pupil dilation or your mannerisms. Okay, you diverted your eye, that means you're 75% likely to be embarrassed, or to be going, hey, that's a great offer. The side of your mouth just went up a tiny bit, or so we're going to start to see, like in negotiations and interpersonal reactions, we're going to start to see it being used. There's medical applications that are going to be coming as well, where artificial intelligence will be able to tell, if you are depressed before you're even exhibiting large-scale symptoms, right? So technology will infiltrate those types of careers as well, but we're going to see a scenario where humanity still, wants that human interaction. And certainly people from my vintage want that human interaction. Younger generation seem to require it less. So that may point to some, patterns there as well. But, if I'm going to, I don't want to tell my problems to a computer and have it give me a statistical analysis of what the most likely, reason I'm feeling sad is and what steps I should take. I want that coming from a person. For me personally, some people might not care, but I think a good portion of people will. So we're going to see in therapy types jobs, community outreach and stuff, that interpersonal touch is still going to be really important. Problem solving and stuff is also something that people can do really well. And robotics is really great, or artificial intelligence and software is really great at analysis. Where did I get the strongest return on investment? Are people wasting 10 seconds throughout the day? Those types of things are real easy for computers to do. But, if a great example would be if you're a plumber. plumbers that are making new construction might find that their jobs are more at risk than plumbers that go into existing houses to retrofit. In an existing house, there's way more variables that have to be considered in terms, and customization. And a lot of the human interaction type jobs will have those types of variables that you really need a massively broad amount of information to be able to impart and help. Like a lot of times when I'm talking and doing sales, I will have anecdotal stories. And those anecdotal stories will paint a picture that is excellent, but trying to have, a computer go, oh, this is a good time for an anecdotal story or something. I mean, it could probably be programmed in at some point in time, but I think a lot of the jobs that historically have relied on human interaction will still be there. But having said that, I want to share details of a conversation I had with an esthetician who does part-time bartending. And so she was asking, are estheticians in trouble and stuff, and she was saying she wants to be doing laser skin treatment and stuff like that. And so my advice to her was, awesome, right? You need to get so good at that you can do it while still having a conversation, because people that are coming into your spa or your skin treatment center are partly coming for the experience as well, right? And if they're coming in to get a facial or their nails done, then they're coming for the experience. So you have to make sure you're super personable, so that experience is good. But, I started to say to her, okay, look at where things are going, and understand that there will be more of an economic division that seems like it's probable. And so the people that are, at the high end of the income bracket, they will become your customers. But the people that are at the low end of the income bracket might not be able to afford manicures, for example. Or a machine might be able to give them perfect looking nails. So Walmart might sell a machine like that for $50. Those people will stop coming into your salon. So it's not just about the technology that's going to directly impact your career. It's the changes that are going to go on around it. And when I was talking to her about the bartender aspect, I said, it depends on when you're a part-time bartender, what kind of bartending you're doing, because, I go to lots of conferences. So at the evening receptions, there's always bartenders that are serving drinks. That job could be done way more efficiently by a machine, way more efficiently. And the reality is I'm walking up, I'm saying, here's my beer ticket, and it's giving me a beer. There's no interaction, there's no interpersonal relationship that's happening there. So that job is likely to be replaced. Unless people really feel that they don't want to deal with a robot, and there will be some kickback like that. And I'm not saying I don't support that kickback, but that's one aspect of it. And then I said, if your bartending job is in a restaurant, then you have to look at the whole function of the restaurant, right? If you're a bartender, and let's say you've got 8 stools in front of you, you're giving really great service to those 8 people. They're there for the experience of talking to you as much as they are for the beer. In some cases, if they're your regulars. So that job, that's a plus for the human interaction. But also within this restaurant bar, there's 16 tables. Those 16 tables could be served just as well by a robotic bartender, right? Those drinks could come out of a spigot as easily as they could out of the bottles that I'm pouring. So that, there will be some demand for bartenders, like the person standing behind the bar, but some of those jobs will also disappear. And then it's not just how the technology is going to impact your specific restaurant or job. What happens if 2 doors down, the whole thing is automated? And for a little while, that's pretty cool, and people want to go see the robotic bartender, right? So that's going to hammer your business, and it's going to pull customers out of your place. There's also going to be customers that want to come into your place because there's humans there, but the other bar can be more cost effective than you can because it's cheaper to have a machine and a person doing the job. So there's going to be economic pressure on your bar intrinsically. And then when you consider the impact that the job loss is going to have on society. We're starting to see that same type of thing with COVID. Now, people are feeling the pinch, and so they're more likely to shop where it's cheap. Obviously, people are more likely to shop with Amazon because you don't have to go out, and the young people love it. But I can be sitting here as a person and go, I want to go to this really super awesome Starbucks. Love my Starbucks coffee. But if a self-serving kiosk opens up next door and the coffee there is $1 cheaper per cup, then it comes down to, is my saying hi to that person and having that 30-second interaction worth $1? And for some people it might be, for a lot of people it won't be. And if enough people say it's not worth it, then that Starbucks goes, we're in trouble. We've lost 10 or 20% of our customers, right? So
they're already closing.
well, and I mean, and COVID has just hammered so many businesses, but those types of changes are starting to come more and more. And so, when I do the coffee example, a lot of times people are like, well, I don't want my coffee, from a robot. But if we did a poll here, probably 30% of people wouldn't care, maybe more. In which case, coffee shops are in trouble. In which case, being a barista is probably not a strong career. Right? Now, owning a coffee shop or servicing a coffee shop that is automated, probably a strong business.
Right.
And please know, I'm not advocating for technology to knock out jobs. My goal is to try and help people understand what's coming. Sometimes I get kickback from people and they get very angry at me. They're like, you're profiting off the demise of humanity. And I'm really trying to help humanity because I know these changes are coming, right? It's irrefutable. So we just have to do our best to prepare.
Hey, Dennis, sorry to just jump in here, but that literally lines up exactly with my question. So I just wanted to hop in.
Yeah.
I think I'm personally in that 2% upper limit of your curve, but I think just in my knowledge, I love tech. I followed it all along. I already looked up the robot you showed to see how much it was. So I'm 100% on board. But the thing that I'm not certain about, even as someone who loves all of this stuff, is how we as a society can still be optimistic about the coming disruption. It just seems terrifying to me. And you've said you're optimistic. So I'd love to hear what your take on it. And I'm sure you've heard Andrew Yang in the States talk about this. His big thing is universal basic income to give people the time and space to reskill. But I'm just curious what your take is on that, because that's, I think, my big piece that I remain unable, as I guess one of the evangelists, to even tell other people it's okay, because I don't know how to say it's going to be okay.
So thanks, Sean. And it's, believe me, I know how intimidating it can be. When I'll go back to that same conference in New York City, and I've just got such a strong impression of this in my mind. I had a 2-block walk from my hotel to the Javits Conference Center, and I passed 500 cabs, and I'm just like, oh man, none of these people know what's coming. Nobody's preparing, and so it was overwhelming and depressing. And sometimes I still feel like it is a massive amount of work that we have to go through. It's really sad to me that there's not more conversation about this in the election, in the U.S. and ultimately here.
Yeah.
Because this is, quite honestly, this is the topic. If we're going to fix the environment, this is how we're going to do it. If we want to have a strong economy, this is how we're going to do it. And so it really does need a fundamental, top to bottom approach. And so, what I believe is in 15 years time, and I know this is going to sound terrible to people right now, in 15 years time, things are going to be incredible. As long as we have enough people that understand this technology going through it, because if only a few people understand this technology, then things can get really warped. It's the other reason I think everybody needs this literacy, so we all have a seat at the table of what humanity is going to look like. So going back to your question then, universal basic income is something that is picking up a lot of steam and is, frankly, I think likely to happen pretty much everywhere. Whether or not, whether or not the countries can afford it is a second question, because here's a challenge with universal basic income. That money has to come from someplace, and we're already seeing how devastating these impacts are for our government. There's a lot of discussion like we're going to be paying for this for 40 years, and we're putting our kids in debt. So universal basic income has to come from someplace. And so then the question is, if we don't have a bunch of people that can get these new world jobs, and sorry, Sean, this is going to sound worse for a second, so I apologize.
Problem.
But it's important to understand these changes are coming no matter what, period, right? And they're going to come to Canada faster than they come to Nicaragua because we have a higher cost of living. If I'm paying somebody $18 to sling coffee, I'm really interested in a robotic coffee machine. If I'm paying somebody $3 to sling coffee, not as important, right? So we're going to see the whole job market change, but these changes will be rolled out everywhere. They're going to hit the US and Canada hard. Western Europe is going to be hit hard, UK, Japan, countries that have high cost of living, high salaries, because it's just the impact is greater and the benefit is greater. And so the job loss will be accelerated here. So it's really critical that we have the skills to get these new jobs as well, because a lot of these new jobs are portable, and COVID is teaching us that as well, right? I look at, I'm not sure how many people know this, Detroit declared bankruptcy, and I think it was 2013. And again, this is going to sound worse before it gets better. Detroit declared bankruptcy because of economic pressure. People lost their jobs, automation in the automotive industry. And once enough people lose their job, you have the potential for economic slowdown and halt, right? So the people lose their job in the automotive industry. They stop going out to restaurants. Restaurants close. Nobody can buy big screen TV. The restaurant people aren't buying big screen TVs. And the whole thing just kind of grinds. And what I love to do is to paint a picture that says, imagine imagine New York City and New Jersey. You got the Hudson River in between. And there's a job in New York City for a new fashion designer. But New York City doesn't have a bunch of people with these skills. New Jersey does. Where's that job going? Jersey. Jersey person's going to go through the Lincoln Tunnel every day, right? And so the people in New Jersey have all these jobs and everything is great. People in New York City don't. They can't pay their mortgages. They're defaulting on rent. People start leaving. Then the other businesses fail, and you have that economic spiral. And if we are not on top of this in Alberta, and so far the truth is I don't know that we are, right? There are countries that are doing much better in terms of getting this high-tech, prep to their youth. And so we have to do a better job. And, that's why I'm kind of happy to be here to talk to you guys today about this, because the first step is understanding what's coming, right? Okay, so universal basic income, I think is highly likely, and I think that's a big part of the solution. But that only works if you have people in these new world jobs, because if all these new world jobs go over to Asia or to the Middle East, then you don't have the revenue, the tax revenue, to be able to afford it, right? And so, here's a great example in terms of our education system. The United Arab Emirates signed an agreement in November of last year. That was a $360 million agreement to put AI labs in 1,300 schools. So now, 5 years down the road, all the kids graduating from in the UAE all have this knowledge. Where are these jobs going? Where are the opportunities going? And if the countries that are doing this are over, in the UAE, I'm not trying to pick on them, but just they made this really great decision. So if I'm going, okay, I need some artificial intelligence to do this big data analysis for me, and that company or that software is owned by a company in the UAE, then that's where that money is going. And so we're not just talking about changes to the workforce, we're talking about changes to the entire taxation base, how governments operate, tariffs, everything is going to change in the next 5 years. And it's really critically important that we have a bunch of people that understand this. As you know, we have to understand this as a society, not just one person or two people that are really smart that get this. You know, at the government level, we have to have our voters understand this, because when it comes time to put our ballots in again, we need someone like Andrew Yang that is looking to the future, not looking to where things are today. And so, you know, the truth is, it is going to be hard for some people, and we are going to need greater social assistance, and we are going to need a whole lot of humanity to pull through it. The rewards could be incredible in terms of improvements to quality of life. And, you know, if we've got things like artificial intelligence out there that is telling me Dennis has a half-second extra delay in his speaking patterns, or his pulse is this, or his heart is this, therefore he's likely in early stages of that. Man, we can fix so many things before they happen. But we are at the point of I think this is the greatest transition in the history of mankind. Electricity was obviously huge, undoubtedly beneficial. This one is very polarizing. Some people are going to do incredibly well, and some people are going to really struggle. And so, you know, with my goal, a lot of it is to try to get the people on this side of the curve to understand the technology, to both be able to help themselves, and so that we can craft humanity in a really great way moving forward, right? If everybody in the US understood what was coming, Andrew Yang would be on your ballot. And I don't want to profess to be an expert on Andrew Yang and whether or not all of his policies were great. I just know he was the only one that was really talking about this.
Yeah, that was also my read on and why I was very disappointed you didn't get more traction, because a lot of what you were saying lined up with him, especially the idea of trucking jobs was his example he always went with.
Well, and you know, it's almost like politicians trot out the same message, and the same message right now is not going to cut it, right? You know, when we our forefathers settled, you know, Canada and the US, there was some hardship. You know, there might not have been a whole lot of 8-hour work days. People have to put in the work. But the great news is, man, Sean, I'm teaching 8-year-olds robotics, 10-year-olds robotics, and they can do incredible things. If I can teach an 8-year-old, I can teach an adult. And and there's nothing super magical about what we do. We've got a great system, we've templated it, so now I can take it into schools and they can start teaching it. It's a solvable issue. What it takes is, it takes people to get out of their comfort zone and to be willing to learn it, and to, you know, to know that they're not going to know everything. But it doesn't matter if you don't know all this stuff today, right? The good news right now is these changes, while they're coming, and they're coming fast, they're not here today. Right? I mean, you know, most of the hardship that we're feeling in this province is COVID and oil and gas, right? And so COVID may or may not resolve itself over the next 3 to 6 months. Hopefully it does, with vaccines and the like. And the economy, the oil and gas dependency is something that the government is just going to have to move past, right? Which is not a shot at oil and gas. It's just, you know, it is. Whether it is right or wrong, and it is more environmentally friendly to use biomass or solar or wind, all those green energies and stuff, whether that is right or wrong almost doesn't matter if that's the direction that the masses are going, right? So we have to be knowledgeable about that and preparing for it. Do I want to see the oil and gas industry come back? Yes, I really do. And I also want us to simultaneously move as fast as we can towards whatever technology can replace it in a very clean and environmentally friendly way, right? And, you know, so the solutions for me always come back around to more people having this education and this understanding. And as more people get it, it becomes less intimidating. And the reason I wanted to show this guy doing the push-ups and the headstand and stuff is because, you know, when we do that in a classroom and then get the kids up to program it, the kids are so excited, man, 90%. If we can get 90% of people to learn how to do this, there's no problem at all, right? Now, and that's not to say that truck drivers are going to become high-end roboticists. Some could, but you know, we don't all have the engineering mindset and training or you know, education historically to become world-class roboticists. But that's okay. We don't need to. We just have to understand this so we can layer that knowledge into whatever we're passionate about.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Does anyone else have any questions? I know that there's a lot in the chat. Would anyone like to come forward and ask them?
Oh, hi, Jackie. It's Kevin Parsons here.
Hey, Kevin.
How are you?
Great. Nice to hear from you.
Yeah. I'm interested in how this is going to affect the solar and wind, alternate energy sector. Any thoughts on that?
I think technology is going to be huge in those areas. I mentioned earlier the test that was done that improved the efficiency of the solar panel by up to 10% or something. In that same article, they were talking about how there's millions of different combinations of elements that you could put together that might produce really great results. But because there's millions of possibilities, that's not cost effective for a person to do that. It's a really, really great application for robotics and AI that could produce some incredible and surprising results. So I think that alternative energies are going to get significantly better. You know, as well, hydro, you know, the use of, and I would expect we'll start to see energy coming off of the ocean as well, you know, to go with the waves up and down or something along that line to turn turbines. I'm not an engineer, but I would expect we're going to start to see those types of things. So I think that alternative energy is likely to improve, but I also believe that batteries have to improve to make that sustainable and to make that really great. And there is talk of, you know, significantly improved batteries. I read an article about the first superconductor that is that will work at room temperature, superconductor at room temperature. I don't know if, you know, how long something like that is until it gets into the battery world or the electronics world, but something like that. There are going to be game changers in every industry. And so, you know, that's another part of this is if you're going to upgrade your skills, and I think everybody ultimately needs to, it's not I'm going to upgrade my skills and then I'm done. We just have to accept the fact that the rest of our lives are going to be a constant upgrading of skills because technology is going to keep changing. And if you can keep yourself at the sharp end of that spear, there will always be incredible opportunity for you. And yeah, but alternative energies can be huge. And really, truly, the changes in oil and gas are going to be huge as well. All of it.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, anybody else?
Yes, Deepo here. Jackie, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, hi Dennis. Thank you for your presentation so far. So my question is, I've been an accountant and finance professional who doesn't want to pivot. What kind of program courses can such a professional take, or just to get something you can actually blend with current experience as far as accounting and finance is concerned?
Sorry, was that, I apologize. I got a little bit of breakup in there as you were talking. Were you saying accounting?
I think, sir, Dennis, I think the question, is that Deepo?
Yes, this is Deepo.
Oh, okay, sorry. I think your question here was, I want to remain in accounting and finance, but would like to work in a place like Amazon. As far as AI and robotics are concerned, what type of courses or programs can I take to roboticize or artificial intelligence size, my words, my current resume to attract Amazon? Is that fair, Deepo?
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay, awesome. So part of the challenge with this right now is as we're going through these changes, there are not a huge amount of courses that are available, right? So I don't want to defer from that answer because that's a critical question. But what I can tell you is we're putting together a roadmap, and we're only just at the start of it to try to go, okay, these are the companies that are hiring. What specific skills are they looking for? The one thing that I would want to say to you is become AI literate in a big way, and a lot of that honestly can be done online through Google searches and stuff, through watching YouTube videos, just to boost that literacy for starters. There are universities that have high-end robotics and coding courses. I don't know if those are a possibility for you. Waterloo's got a good program. We're also putting together a list of the top universities and courses. The challenge is and this is part of the challenge of where we're at right now. There are not a lot of really great options for what you could take that would be a 1 or 2 week course or a 6 week course or something along that line that you're going to go, yeah, that's the solution. You know, we are working as a company on building solutions for that and building those bridges. I don't want to tell you that we've got those bridges. Like, we've got a educator over in the UK that's putting together an artificial intelligence curriculum for us. A university level type course. We don't have that at this point in time. So what we're trying to do to pivot to address this issue is we know that people that are losing their jobs don't have 4 years to retrain and go through a university degree. That's not realistic. So we're mapping at this time the skills that different careers and industries have, what they would need, and how we augment those people over a short period of time. I can't tell you that there are any great programs out there that I'm aware of that would do that over a short period. But understanding artificial intelligence when you walk in and understanding coding, I mean, it's a question as well of, a lot of times, again, if you're an IT manager, you don't have to be the IT professional. You have to understand enough of it to know when you're being tricked or manipulated and stuff. The other thing I would say to you is, within accounting and financial planning and those types of things, the tasks that you're doing today that are highly replicatable are going to be automated, right? And there's a lot of talk out there right now about, and it kind of makes me unhappy, because a lot of companies talk about, we're not going to displace people, we're making assistive technology. We're going to create, artificial intelligence that's going to make an accountant's job easier. How is that so that's assisting the company, but from an accountant perspective, something that makes your job easier means that maybe instead of 8 hours of work a day, you've got 6. Right? Or there's 10 of you in a company, maybe we only need 7. Right? So as an accountant or a financial planner, you're not going to be the person that's coding it, but sorry, just hearing the beeping there. Okay, it's coming through here. Okay. You're not going to be the person that's coding the artificial intelligence, but if you understand what it can do and you can have a conversation about that in your interview, then you're more likely to get the job. You're going to show better, right? And if you're in your interview, even if it's something as simple as, I'm excited to implement and work with, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and stuff to try to bring enhancements to the process of accounting and financial planning. There's not going to be a lot of people, there's not going to be a lot of accountants out there that are going, I'm looking forward to figuring out the process of how AI can streamline all of these things. But there will be huge advantage to somebody who understands artificial intelligence and understands accounting and can work as that bridge.
Okay. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Janelle, did you have, I know that noticed that you had some great questions in the chat.
Oh yeah, thank you, Jackie. Oh, okay. One of the questions I would like to ask is just about the Indigenous community. So I've been considering targeting a pivot as an Indigenous relations advisor. And I know just from some of the networking I've been doing in the Indigenous community that, you know, they're really behind in a lot of areas, especially in technology. And so I feel really concerned about that community after listening to this presentation. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about how we can help the Indigenous community, and what do you see, I guess, as, you know, I don't know, potential pain points for them in the future?
I think that a lot of marginalized communities, you know, segments of society stand to have a significant problem. And this comes down to why I think everybody needs to have this understanding, because we do need better education for our kids. You know, we need better education for Indigenous kids. We're working with an organization in the US that's trying to put maker spaces into inner city communities where, you know, where there's high crime rates and stuff. And the email back from the person just said that the, you know, some of the people that would maybe be taking this course are going to be drug dealers and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, well, that's my comment to him. And I'm not trying to parallel those two directly, but my comment to him was, yeah, great. Those people need this education, right? The people that feel like they don't have options and stuff need this education. And certainly, I don't intend in any way to say that the Indigenous community, you know, drug dealers and stuff. I'm not trying to paint that, but the Indigenous community does, I think, in a lot of cases, tend to fall behind. So my advice there is, it's really got to start with small hubs and try to flourish. And, you know, one of the interesting things for me is, you know, like when I say a small hub, like I'm talking like a maker space or something. Get the schools doing it so that some of the kids can do it and some of the teachers can be teaching it. And you start to make that little break. But when I'm talking to educators in general, we really strive to get culture change. And by that, what I mean is, like, our organization, we do free presentations for schools. So any school in the world really, but in North America could call us up and say, hey, can you do a meeting like this with my staff? And we'll say, sure, and we'll do that for free. Because I want the educators to understand what's coming. Now, and understand why this education is so important for the kids. Now, what typically happens is after the educators hear what's coming, they're like, okay, well, this is important, but I don't know anything about robotics. So it's like, okay, so they've got the real world understanding on what they need to do. Now we have to work on the confidence and get them okay to teach it. We have to get the teachers to think, okay, this is something I can do. I'll take that risk, right, that chance. And then once we've got the teachers to do that, now we have to go and inspire the kids, right? Because when the teachers can't inspire the kids properly, we get 2% at the high school level, right? Or 5% at the middle school level. And the adult community, the Indigenous communities, are going to be very similar in terms of the same steps that need to be taken. And then the last thing I love to do with schools is I will say, I'm happy to do a presentation like this for your parent association or your parents. And so if we hit the teachers, we hit the students, and we hit the parents, we have culture change. And we have everybody pulling in the same direction. The school needs some money to put programs in place for the kids. The parents will raise it. But they'll find it somehow because it's so important, and it's so inexpensive to put this education into schools. It's crazy. The same would be true on reserves and stuff, and with our Indigenous population. We need to get, we have to hit it with multi-prong, and I'd be happy to work with you on that and to try to find solutions, because, you know, here's an interesting thing as well. When parents are looking at this, you know, and certainly not every parent can afford this, but, you know, a band might be able to go, okay, let's get 10 robots or 20 robots. And then we train the parents and the parents work with the kids. And that's such a great thing that can be happening right now. So like for the people that are on this, if they've got kids, you know, if I'm a parent, I'm in robotics, I'm worried about my kids. So I'm sure that a lot of the parents listening to this are like, oh, my kids are in big trouble. What a great thing to do if you can get, you know, a robot that is age appropriate for your kids and learn it together. Right. And that's, you know, that's one of the first steps to me is, again, you know, as an adult, don't think you have to walk in and start wiring circuit boards and soldering and understanding JavaScript or Python. Just start playing. Do so, like, you know, bond with your kids, have a great experience, and gain that basic understanding and literacy in coding. And then from there, you can step forward and move forward. And that might be a really great way to approach the Indigenous community, is if they can understand what's coming. Because firstly, there's a big disconnect with what's coming and what people, you know, what people think is coming. So if we get them that knowledge, and then we can get them the skills and the tools to be able to teach it and inspire it, you know, we're not gonna hit entire school bases and populations. Even at the middle school, the best we get is typically 90%. Elementary kids, we can hit 98%. So we have to start fixing it for our youth. At the same point in time, that process can fix it for our adults. That was a really long answer. Did that help at all? I'm happy to work with you, Janelle. Once, you know, if we can.
Oh, I would love that.
My
brain is blowing up right now.
Awesome. Anything.
This is awesome.
I'll put the same thing out there for anybody. I am just so passionate about trying to get this education to as many people as possible and this literacy, because really what it's going to take, you know, and this goes back to Sean's question, how can we feel hopeful about the future? Because we've got 56 people in this presentation that's been going on for 2 hours. People care. People want to make a difference for themselves and for their children and for their community. We just have to find a way to empower ourselves. So if I can help anybody do that, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Okay, any other questions, you guys? There's a lot of questions. Just, oh, I hear someone.
Sorry, Angela, I saw her face pop up animated.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to mute myself. Sorry, can I pop in and say something right off the cusp of what you and Janelle were talking about? And I do have a question. You mentioned about like how you believe it's a multi-pronged problem, and it requires the combination of educators, kids, parents, but also I'm curious about what your opinion is about like the government. Like you mentioned earlier in the introduction that you talk to thousands of educators and directors of ministries of education, but I'm just wondering if you had a chance to talk to the governments or write to them about the absolute need to grow this, I guess, the awareness about providing training programs and other incentives that are so vital to transform and just like mobilizing all the kids and our workforce to go into this direction. Because like you said, with your example of the UAE and how they're already mobilizing their kids to learn robotics, and they're going to be at an increased advantage to the rest of us, and then all our revenue within our country are, you know, in the future very quickly will go to them. And so yeah, like I'm just curious, like what have you talked to the governments, or is anybody talking to the government? And I agree with you, like how come they don't talk about this in their elections? Like if this is the single most important kind of transformation that's happening.
And the fast answer is I've sure tried. And this is not gonna sound great, and this is not gonna be a comment on the current government. But you know, when I started to reach out to people at the very beginning of this process, when I said to DJ, the founder of this product, I'm like, you should go talk to educators. I got a meeting with the Ministry of Education for Alberta. And so we sat down, I'm like, okay, you know, here, I want to know what you guys are doing to, you know, prepare for these changes and stuff. And, you know, it was kind of interesting. They said to me, the timing of this meeting is really great. We're just starting, and this goes back several years now, we're just starting to redo our curriculum. And so the timing on this is awesome. And I'm like, I'm so glad to hear that, because what we have in our curriculum for robotics and technology and stuff is pretty outdated and not adequate. I said, how are you planning on addressing AI and robotics and, and these changes that are coming? And the response I got back was, we have no idea what you're talking about. Now that goes back a few years ago. And so we did a little bit of educating and stuff like that. And then we started to get a little bit of momentum. But really what needs to happen, I believe, is that the Minister of Education needs to sit down with the Minister of Labor, and they need to sit down and have a strong understanding of how these changes are going to come. Because what I can tell you is, within the school system right now, schools can fix this for $20 to $40 per kid. The average cost that is forecast on reskilling, the World Economic Forecast, or the World Economic Forum forecasts $24,800 US per person. $20 to $40, $24,000. Now, here's the reality. A bunch of people are in the, I'm going to need to do some reskilling, right? And so in that world, so we're going to have to put resources to this. The government will have no choice. And, to the credit of the federal government, their first program for like wage subsidies of 10% fell flat, and then they quickly realized, that's dumb, everybody's going to be unemployed. We have to bump that amount up to make it worthwhile for companies to keep the people there, or else we're just going to pay them on unemployment, right? So that was a level of awareness, which was good, but we have to have the same understanding of, this is what is coming. These are the changes that are coming. And there's a lot of people out there that will say technology has always created more jobs than it has taken away. And whether or not that's true this time, and I'm not sure that it is true, and there are forecasts that are very well-researched forecasts that say, yes, technology is going to make more than it takes away. And there are other very well-researched ones that say, no, it's not. It's going to be half, right? Whatever those numbers are, it's going to require significant retraining, because a bunch of people that have lost their jobs won't have the skills needed for the new jobs that are coming. And so, I've tried to talk to government. I did not have success talking to our Ministry of Education, or talking to the Minister of Education under the previous government, in spite of the fact that I met with him at conferences like 15 times, and it was always, I'll come and I'll talk to you in 5 minutes, and then he never did, which was really disappointing to me, because I've talked to the Ministry of Education in New South Wales and Australia. I've spoken with the executive director of STEM education for the USA prior to the administration change to Trump. But the people that I talk to, they're like, okay, we need to understand this, and then they do understand it, and it starts to make changes. The challenge is to get those opportunities. So if anybody has a pipeline for me to talk to the government, I'm happy to do so. When I have made overtures into the government to try to get meaningful meetings, I have gotten a few, but a lot of times it's like, well, contact this person and maybe you can get on the public committee, and it's like, but I've got knowledge that you need to hear now. Not Dennis as one member of 100 people on a committee. I don't have time for that, right? And that sounds terrible, but the truth of the matter is, as of today, we get way more responsiveness from governments outside of Canada. Now, I have not made massive attempts to get in touch with the governments recently in Canada, so I can't say that would still be the environment. I don't want to throw any disparity at the Ministry of Education in Alberta. I have not tried since the administration change. But yes, it's going to take that kind of a push, and I ultimately I need to do a better job of that myself. That's a bad on me. So it's at least 50% on me. And it's not at all on the current government, because I haven't made any attempts. The previous government I was not successful with. but yeah, government needs to know what's coming, because like I said, this impacts tariffs, taxes, employment programs, you know. And with a good example of this again would be the city of Calgary has a $100 million fund. I think it's $100 million to stimulate growth through technology, to attract technological companies here and stuff. And so we talked to them, and you know, I said something like, okay, for $2 million, every kid in this city could be learning robotics, all of them. And the response was, how many jobs can you create in the next 3 years, basically, or 2 years, or whatever that window was. And I'm like, okay, I'm not talking about creating jobs in 2 years. I'm talking about creating an intellectual infrastructure that is going to solve the problem, period. If everybody graduates from our schools learning this technology, there is so much abundance and opportunity. The people with the new high-tech skills make jobs for people that don't have high-tech skills, right? We create abundance through that entrepreneurial spirit and entrepreneurship. But the programs that exist today are all what can happen within the next 2 to 3 years. What can you do that's going to make a difference in the next 2 to 3 years? And that's important that we throw money at that, because you know, you guys are looking for jobs. There's a lot of people looking for jobs right now. So we have to try to find some short-term solutions, but we also have to understand the long-term solutions, because otherwise it's almost like vitamins versus, you know, chemotherapy or medicine, right? If we can give the vitamins up front, then we don't have to spend as much for healthcare down the road.
Completely. Okay, you guys, we probably have time for one more question. I know we've almost taken 2.5 hours. Poor Dennis must be fading asleep soon. Any other questions, you guys?
Hi, Dennis. Thank you for the presentation. Just a short questions. So in your opinion, like for the carbon impact, what kind of which level of person can be survived in the future? Like for example, in my industry, like a mechanical industry, we are probably the first industry to experience the impact of the automation or lots of technologies. Like for example, we are probably the first industry to experience the self-coding impact. So in your opinion, like in the future, what kind of, which level of person we should reach to make sure that we can survive?
The people that are going to have the greatest level of success in the future are people that are good critical thinkers, creative problem solvers, and that have strong technical skills on top of that, right? So one of the truths about robotics education and coding education is it's great because you get a skill, you know, a hard skill that's going to lead to potentially employment. But it's also training your mind to think a certain way and to act, you know, and to be able to problem solve. The people that are going to have the greatest success over the next 5 to 10 years are going to be people that have creativity, first and foremost. But for the vast majority of people, if you have that creativity and problem solving skill and layer it with technology, right? So that's not to say that you can't do well if you're, you know, just creative and don't have the technical literacies or whatnot. But, you know, if you take a good, honest look at where you are today and say, are most of the tasks that I do at work today repetitive, then you're at a high risk of automation. And, you know, and again, where we are today is I don't want to say it's not the most important thing, because if you're sitting there and you don't have a job, where we are today is so critically important, right? So then there's finding the today job, but the most important thing is where we are going to be in 6 months, 18 months, 2 years time. And it's going to mean that we're going to have less leisure time because we have to retrain ourselves, right? In the evenings or on the weekends, or if we're not working during the days and stuff, right? This is not a time for being relaxed, you know. And I going back again to my story about the people that we're working with in the U.S. that are looking at inner city schools. A lot of the kids they might attract don't know how to read, and that's okay. It's okay if you don't know how to read. You can still learn about robotics. You can still learn some things, harder for you. But if you don't know how to read today and you're in grade 10, that's a problem. But theoretically, you've still got 60 years on the planet or 70 years on the planet. It's bad that you don't know how to read now, but if you fix it in 3 or 4 years' time, then you're in a way better position. And that's kind of the same approach we got to take with this, right? So the more technological education you can give yourself, the more likely you are to survive and to thrive. And really, if your job involves creativity and problem solving, you're way more likely to be safe. That's probably the number one delineator, but you know, it's not really a level of technology. The more technology you have, the better. The more problem solving skills you have, the better. The more creativity you have, the better. But those are kind of sliders for everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, so unless there's one really quick question, I'm going to let Dennis have a bit of a rest. We've utilized so much of your day. Honestly, I can't begin to tell you how grateful I am. Okay, any really quick questions?
Jackie, Greg here. I got one really quick one, if that's okay.
Go for it.
Dennis, are there any schools actively in Calgary here using your program?
There are. I can't even tell you which ones off the top of my head. We've got robotics in probably 10 or 15 schools in Calgary. That used to be what I specifically focused on, and then as I started to get really busy with speaking around the world, I passed that off to somebody else, and I can't even recall which schools have our robotics programs. But I can probably research that and get that information to Jackie if you'd like, and then maybe she can pass that along. And you know, the other aspect I would say is if your kids are not getting this type of opportunity at school, you need to talk to your school administrator, your principal, and try to make that happen, honestly. And you know, one of the things I say to people all the time in my educational presentations is, if you don't have this education for your kids and you want it, connect me to the principal. I mean, virtually, I'm assuming that most of the people that have heard this presentation are like, wow, I had no idea how all-encompassing these changes were. The educators are the same way. They just don't know. And it's not their fault. I'm not critical of them. They're just busy going from A to B, and especially during COVID, right? So I'm on the school council for my daughter's school, and I haven't, you know, she just changed schools. I haven't even talked to them about what's coming and the changes we need to make and stuff, and help them. And I'm the guy for that, but I'm not doing that because I know that everybody right now is just trying to deal with COVID, right? So the timing on trying to get new programs into schools is tough, but certainly the earlier everybody understands what's coming, the better. And that's the first step. So, I mean, if your kids don't have this in their school, or don't have good robotics programs, if your kids aren't taking them, because some schools have robotics programs, but your kids might be over here on the, you know, on the curve and not interested in taking it. We can work with the schools to help them fix that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dennis, we're getting so many accolades and thank you messages in the chat. So we'll have to download those and share those with you.
I would love that. If that's possible, that would be great. Yeah.
You can use them as testimonials. A lot of aha moments here. So Dennis, would you be willing to potentially come back and do maybe a part 2?
Oh, for sure.
us?
Yeah, you bet.
That would be terrific. And we haven't even touched the surface on the other questions that I've received that I just never had a chance to ask you that people have sent to me in advance. So so maybe we can do this on a sort of a part 2 webinar if that works.
That would be perfect. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Happy to help. Thank you so
Terrific.
much.
And you're most welcome. And we will be in touch regarding the intro robotics courses too.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much, Dennis. So grateful.
Bye-bye.
Bye.